Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The
The doctors
doctors
are
are
in.
in.
Today we have author Nicolette Andrews joining us. Nicolette is a romantic fantasy author, aka Romantasy, with well over 30 books to her name. Based in California, you can find her pretty much everywhere. I always see her on social media. She's always at a live event, and in fact, that is how she and I met. She's also a fan of the 3 C's: cooking, camping, and cozy video games. Nicolette, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yay, we're so glad you're here. Oh my
Yay.
gosh. So, we always like to start. Tell us about your writer's journey. When did you start writing and publishing and all that good stuff?
Oh,
The beginning.
this is gonna sound so cliche, but I did start in high school, like doing the, creative writing classes in English and stuff like that. And then I kind of just dabbled. I did fan fiction for a while, like just casually. And about 12 years ago, I finished my first like epic fantasy novel and I decided to self-publish it. And ever since then, I've just been writing basically nonstop. And I've at this point written 15 novels, all romantic fantasy, and I've also co-written 3 novels, so 18 total right now.
Oh, wow. I was going to say
Wow.
Amazon shows a
Yeah.
lot more, but I think some of our anthologies and stuff too, right? Or like
Oh
group settings.
yeah, I don't count like the short stories because I have like a couple like novella length things that are
Hmm.
like tie-ins to to like certain series, and I've been in a couple anthologies with other authors and stuff like that. So I don't, and some of that I republished under my own name, so I don't really count it as its own title because like they're not available, and then they got republished separately
Hmm.
instead of part of the anthology. Because most of the anthologies I was part of, they've like no, they're no longer available. They were like limited time things.
Ah, okay. But 18, man, that is
Yeah,
still, that is a lot. In how many years?
12 years.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So you've been busy. You've
Yeah.
been very busy. So let's start with the fanfic. What were you like fanficking?
So I was really into just I still am a huge anime fan, and I used to write a lot of Inuyasha fan fiction
Ooh.
way back in the day. And then I also got into like some other animes like more niche, like Ouran High School Host Club. I dabbled a little bit in Harry Potter fan fiction, but I never got as deep into it as some of my friends were. Like some of my friends were like lived and breathed Harry Potter fan fiction.
Hmm. Were you publishing on like I don't know what is it,
Oh
AOC and like web
no,
Wattpad and all
uh,
that?
I did a little bit on Wattpad. So I actually like kind of simultaneously was self-publishing and using Wattpad, but I never did fan fiction on Wattpad.
Okay.
Before I did uh, fan fiction, I was on this website. I don't even think it's around anymore called fanfiction.net. That's where I got started. Like back way. I mean, this is early 2000s, like pre 2010. I don't even know if Archive of Our Own was even a thing when I was writing fan fiction. Maybe it was, and I just never got to there. I don't know, but like
Mhm.
I did there, and then I was like releasing uh, chapters on Wattpad when I was first self-publishing my first books. Like I was like my first ever novel I released there, like sporadically, and then like my most popular series, the Dragon Saga, I was releasing on Wattpad and got featured on Wattpad back when they like this is before they were like a big publishing kind of house thing.
Mhm.
But I got to be a feature creator, and that got a lot of views and a lot of, I guess, just like a lot of interest. And like that. I think that's what springboarded that series to be make it so popular because it had like a pre-existing fan base on Wattpad.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, we're gonna have a fun chat because
Yeah.
I've delved a little bit into the whole like um my mind is blanking. Uh web novels. I've dabbled in that a little bit. And I think especially now in 2025 it's hard because there's so much of it. It sounds like you got started when it was kind of like on the up and up. What what was it like? Like how did you gain traction and stuff like that? How'd you know like I want to publish this and this is going to work for this audience?
Honestly, I didn't know anything when I first started. It was always like that's I've gotten really lucky in that I get into things early before they really blow up, and then I just kind of take advantage of the fact that nobody has heard of these platforms. Like Wattpad was still pretty new. Like a friend just randomly told me like, "Oh, you should check this out. You should publish your stories here." I was like, "Yeah, okay." And it was still like in its infancy, and like so you there's less competition. And then by the time I had like gotten my use out of it, I was like, all right. And then I just kind of moved on to like indie publishing. Like I got in before like KU was even a thing. Like I don't it's like not but none of it's like premeditated. It's always like it just happens on accident. I guess I'm just chronically online and I just find things early. I can't really explain it.
That is a skill because to find, all the platforms like YouTube and all of them before you hit that curve where they're really popular, that is really hard. I'm always like late to the party. And so like by the time I try to create it, I'm like, forget it because there's too many people. So that is a skill. You
Yeah.
should market that one itself. So when you were on Wattpad, like obviously you had a following. How were you able to take your following and translate that into independent publishing and like printed books? And because I feel like that's two different markets, right? That's two different readerships.
Oh, 100%. Because Wattpad is very much younger. It's a lot more international folk. So, like, a lot of them couldn't come over to like buy from when I started publishing on like KDP and stuff like that. Like people that were in the Philippines and stuff like that, like they like didn't have access and they were just like, I love these books, but I can't buy them. So like it didn't necessarily translate. The benefit for me was getting live feedback as I was writing the book. So I got a lot of people speculating. I got a lot of people like it was almost like having like hundreds of beta readers at once, which is might be a little overwhelming, but it helped. I think it helped me to make the book stronger. So when it went to actually be published, I did some revisions of it over the version I did on Wattpad, and I think it made it a better book when I actually started looking for actual reviewers and things like that.
Oh wow, that's cool. And I'm guessing because I know like the best practices, at least now, maybe they didn't really know it back then, but they're like, publish on a regular schedule, publish, X amount of chapters per week. Were you doing all that at the
No,
time? Oh,
no, I that's the thing is like they say like publish on a regular schedule, like do like be careful and like or be really intentional. I was working a full-time job and I had like a small child, so there would be weeks and months between chapters. But I feel like the nature of social media, the way it worked for me, is it created more commentary because people would be like, "Oh, I'm waiting for an update," and it would push it harder because it would be getting more comments because there was no updates. And I would like write these really short, snappy chapters that like ended on cliffhangers. Like that's the only thing I did that I think was smart is I
mm-hmm,
was writing a lot of like cliffhanger endings, which is like what they say you should do for serial fiction is
mm-hmm.
do a lot of like shorter and then just like cliffhangers so they just can't stop. Like they keep going chapter to chapter. But I was not good about being consistent. It was like I it was so bad. I remember there was like months and months between chapters sometimes because I would just get so busy with real life.
I mean, yeah, gosh, I was publishing on Royal Road a few years ago and my book was even done and I could schedule the chapters and I was still bad about like putting it up there. It's hard to keep that momentum for sure, you know?
Oh, totally. It's really hard because especially you got like a million other things on your plate. It's hard to be creative
Mhm.
and like deliver a chapter every week. It's almost impossible.
For sure. And I mean, I'm sure everyone's question next then would be monetization. Did they even have that on not web is it webtoons? Why am I thinking Wattpad? I keep saying the wrong
Yeah.
thing. But did they even have like monetization options and stuff back then?
No, they didn't have a monetization back then. So I was literally just creating content for free just because I loved the praise, I liked the feedback.
Oh
So I
wow.
wasn't even making money on it then. And it's like, and a lot of what I was doing in the early days, like the first, like, I want to say the first like 3 or 4 years of publishing, I made next to nothing. But I was just so excited to get my stories out there. I just kept pushing and I just kept putting stuff out there and I kept iterating on like, my process and stuff like that. Like a lot of it was like a lot of my career trajectory has been just trial and error. Like I was just saying to somebody today, it's I did a lot of trial by fire. Like I learned a lot
Mhm.
from just making a lot of mistakes and just doing stuff and kind of just going in blind and new stuff.
Ooh, okay. We'll deviate from the thing I was thinking of asking you. What did you learn? Like what would you have redone differently and what were you like this I got to double down on cuz it's working?
I think the thing I would have doubled down on more was honestly doing more of what I get excited about and
Mhm.
doing less about like trend chasing because I and doing the thing is like I don't like how fast I published a lot of books. I wish I would have spent more time on them, but I also think I wouldn't be here where I am now if I hadn't spent so much time like pumping out a lot of books at once. Like
Mhm.
I feel like I learned so much through each book in a short period of time that I couldn't have done otherwise. So it's hard to say, oh, I would have done it completely differently because I wouldn't have known to do it differently. Like
Yeah.
I learned to do it because I put in like if you ever heard that term like 1,000 hours, where
Mhm.
it's like you need to put in 1,000 hours to become a master of something. Like I feel like I did those 1,000 hours in a really truncated amount of time, just really writing fast and doing as many books as possible.
Wow, I'm still here, by the way. Hi. This is fascinating. I'm really enjoying this. I didn't even know what Wattpad was, so I looked it up while we were talking. And you literally have like on one of your books, The Priestess and the Dragon, you have almost 900,000 views on that one, and then 163 on the Kitsune book. That's fantastic. And from a business standpoint, what I was wondering, and talking about pumping out the books, is as a writer, a lot of, especially this happens with screenwriter, any kind of writing, is you have writers who they have one thing and that's like their project, that's like their baby, and like their entire career or is hung on getting this one book out. So I feel like what you've done is really turn the tail on that whole thing, and by kind of going wide with so many books, you don't have to sell a million ever of one book, but you can sell, you almost have at least views of your book, all these different books. You have a lot of different fans in different series, and you do write in series. So you have kind of both going on, instead of, if you can get one person to read one book in this series, they might read the whole series. Maybe they'll jump to the other series, but it doesn't matter because you've hooked them on one series. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yeah, totally. But that's honestly that's probably one thing that I strategized that like I still implement today is like I wanted to have a lot of series. Like I wanted to have a lot of entry points. Like if you look at my Amazon catalog, almost every single book one in my series is free on Amazon and it's intentional because I want to get as many people in the door as possible to explore like the different series, the different worlds, and I do see that like over time having all of these different streams of income, streams of like just different entry points into my work. It like it slowly builds, so I don't have to like hang everything on this one, magnum opus, or I don't have to like focus all my energy on making one thing perfect. I can do a lot, like not to say like oh do a lot of bad, but like I did do a lot bad, just to learn what works and what resonates and what I have the most fun doing. Like I did a lot of anime inspired fiction and fantasy romance. And it was like, a lot of it I wrote in my 20s. And it's like now I'm in my late 30s and I'm like, I'm not the same person I was back then. So I want to move on to other things. But if I had made my entire brand focused around being the, anime inspired romance, then I would just like, it would kind of like, what is that? What's the phrase? Like hangline me, like where I would just be like, I'd be stuck. I'd
Pigeonhole you. You'd be.
pigeonhole me. Yeah. Yeah. Like I'd be pigeonholed being that person forever. Like I could only do that thing even if I'm bored with it or I'm burnt down on it. So like I've always tried to diversify. I've always tried to there's this podcaster I used to listen to, Joanna Penn. She always would talk about multiple income streams and how like a lot of little trickles become a river. And that's kind of the philosophy I've always like from the beginning I've always carried for my business is like I'm always going to have like lots of different things coming into one big river.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I'm trying to help my mother with marketing her books. She has a series of historical fiction, romance, mystery novels. She's got like 5 books in the series, and uh, I think we need to try that. Give away the first book. I think she's done it in the past with some sales, but I think we need to try it again. Like, giving away the first book so you can get them to read the rest of them.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's been really effective for me. Like I've been doing it since like the beginning. It was the strategy back in like 2013 when I started, and it's like still a really viable strategy. It's like one of the only tactics I've seen within self-publishing that has endured. Like it's like even now there's huge amounts of like people getting together and putting thousands of books for free and having these like crazy free for all give your books away free events, and they're so popular now. Like they're so common, and the readers like love them because it gives it's like a free sample. It's like going to Costco.
Hmm.
You know, they get to try lots of different stuff, so it's very effective. I highly recommend it.
It's very valuable for the writer too, though, because don't you get more reviews that way? So that builds up your sales side of it because they have more reviews.
Oh yeah, yeah. My books that are free have like hundreds of reviews versus like my newer book that's like been out 2 years but it's never really been free. It has 14 reviews. You know, it makes a huge difference. And it, like you said, it adds the social proof, so it like gives people more reason to look at check it out because it's like free and it's there's tons of reviews that say it's good. So they're like, yeah, all right, why not?
I wanted to ask you about the subject matter though, because your stories, your series go about dragons or fairies or witches or sorcerers or Japanese mythology, and it seems like wow, you don't hold back. You have a very wide range, and it's really cool. And you talked about having anime as one of your inspirations, so that kind of explains the Japanese side of it. Where do you get your other inspirations for all those other kind of subgenres?
I'm really widely read. I've been like a really avid reader since high school, and I used to read a lot of like high fantasy, like romantic fantasy. I know it's like romantasy is really like huge, like it's very pop culture-y, but it's been around a really long time. So I used to read a lot of that when I was younger. So I took a lot of inspiration from like Jacqueline Carey and Juliet Marillier and Bishop. They're like authors that like a lot of like the big romantasy authors will like reference as like their inspiration. So I read a lot of that, and then I also just have like I just like a lot of different things. Like I went through this phase where I was really deep into Jane Austen novels. So like my Fae ones are like kind of like Jane Austen, Jane Eyre, kind of gothic,
Huh.
Victorian kind of
Okay.
thing. So it's just like I get inspired by things that I'm reading or media I'm consuming, and then I go like I want to explore this in my own way. And I think that comes back from my fan fiction roots, where it's like I see something, I'm inspired by it, and I want to like do my own take on it, basically. So I've just never like let myself do one thing. I just like let my inspiration chase whatever shiny new idea there is.
That's so cool. I like the idea. You all the topics you have are great, and I like all of them. So I'm happy that Rashti's introduced me to your stuff. I'm not as big into the romantic side of it, but I'm actually very into the Japanese stories.
Mhm.
I'm a big anime fan as well. I've been studying Japanese for 4 or 5 years now. I still feel like like a 2 year old trying to speak
Oh
Japanese,
yeah.
but I'm working on it. As a writer though, who started out pretty young, like Roshni and I both didn't start writing screenplays and her novels obviously until later in life. I'm always a little jealous of people who found their creative inspiration young and were able to build right from when they got started. And like how did your family and your friends feel about you taking that as like your whole, like that's what I want to do and that's what I'm going to do?
My family was really supportive. My mom used to write poetry when she was like in college and stuff like that, so I think it just comes naturally for me. And like my grandparents were really like even when I was a little kid, I used to write little like children's books, like basically rip-offs of like children's books I'd already read. Like if you remember those feelings books with the circles and the like the shape people, I
I think
remember.
I'm a lot older than you,
Oh,
so
I like
I know what you're talking about. Those are that's
okay.
so cute. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember writing like a full on rip off of that as a kid. And like stuff like that. So like but so they always knew. Like I wrote like a I put in quotations book in high school that was basically like vaguely it was like basically um like an autobiography, but I pretended it was an autobiography, if that makes sense. Um, and like I remember like letting my friends read it and then like being like, "Wow, you're gonna be an author someday," and I'm being like, "Yeah, totally." And that I have that manuscript still. It's so atrocious. It's so god awful, but I've just always had people that support me. Like even when I was at my like worst, I shouldn't have been doing this kind of stuff. People were still like, "Yeah, go, go." So I've just been lucky that everybody's supportive around me. Everybody around me like has encouraged my storytelling, and like my sister now is like my biggest fan, my biggest hype person. Like she like will go with me to events now, and she'll like sell my books for me because she's like, oh, you'll love this because of XYZ and stuff like that. And my husband, does like he's the reason I can do this full time. Like he was the first person to believe in me, and he was like, we're gonna do it, we're gonna make it work. And like he's just like I'm very lucky that I have a lot of people that really support me.
Aw, that's really cool. I mean, every artist I think needs that, like somebody who's not competing with you in that way as a fellow artist, but who like wants to bolster your art up. So that's awesome.
Yeah, having a hype person in your corner makes a huge difference for
For
sure.
sure, for sure. And speaking of hype, I know the last time we were chatting, you mentioned that you were fulfilling a Kickstarter and you were like sending out like what, 1,000 books or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, we need to talk about Kickstarter
Oh yeah.
because that is like, wow. So this, I guess first of all, we'll start with how many books have you Kickstarted?
Oh gosh. Um, I have a couple that are like pending, so I'm trying to think. I feel like I've done 6 campaigns, and it was and this is like a lot of it was re-releases. So I've done six
Mhm.
campaigns, and it covered basically my whole catalog. The only 2 books are were first time launches through Kickstarter, but the rest is like I've in some form or another I've done my entire catalog through Kickstarter over 6 campaigns basically. And like
Oh,
you said,
wow.
yeah, and I've over those I've done ship thousands of books. Unfortunately, it's a lot of labor, but it's a labor of love. I love doing it.
Oh my gosh. So when you do the Kickstarter, is that for like say your international fans who can't necessarily get it off of like US Amazon or like how did you decide this was the best way to distribute your books?
So I kind of fell into it by accident. My newest series that's still in progress, I wanted to launch the book there first, and just to see, because like it came onto my radar, and I was like, no, let's dabble in it. And it was at first it was just to launch a book some way other than doing on Amazon, because I've kind of gotten disillusioned with Amazon. Just it it's gotten very crowded since when I started, and it's like harder and harder to make money at it. And it's like when it's like your income, you kind of have to like find other streams of income. So I decided to launch my first book on Kickstarter, and it went so well I was able to make like an alternative cover. I was able to like commission artists to do like undercover art and like do a really cool interior and like maps and stuff. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this has huge potential to level up what I have for my books. So I started doing alternate editions of my books, just to like, if you've seen like Bookish Fox and things like that, I was basically trying to like replicate some of these like special editions other people are doing, because it's like I've always wanted to have like foil on my books and like have edges and all this other stuff, and it seemed out of reach. And as I built up the Kickstarters, it became a means to make things uh, to reach the idealized vision I have of what I always wanted for my book. So I just basically had the audacity to do things for myself without like feeling like I needed permission from like having a huge audience, or having like some like some kind of gatekeeper say, "Oh, we'll do this for you." I just did it for myself, basically.
That's amazing. And I have seen your books in person and they are gorgeous. So, yes, definitely worth the money people spend on them just to put them on your shelf because they're so pretty.
I laugh.
Thank
I'm
you.
like, what's a book? like, like, what's a physical book? I can't remember the last time I bought one. Oh, actually, I do know. I have Roshni's piled up here somewhere.
Yeah, Tom's my editor, so I send him
Oh, okay.
yeah, as a thank you. So, okay, so you said 6 or 7? 6 Kickstarters.
6 Kickstarters,
S
yeah, and it covered basically 15 books.
And were you able to fully fund everything you needed, printing and all that stuff, editing, whatever else you needed?
Oh, everything.
That's amazing.
It funded more than like what I needed to do, like what's called offset printing, where it's like a one-time
Mhm.
printing over. I use an overseas company. Plus like profit, plus like it covered shipping, it covered hiring artists to do other future editions. Like it was basically the first one. It covered like a Ingram, like regular print on demand kind of thing. And then I just kept reinvesting the capital I got from the Kickstarters to do bigger and bigger stuff every time. So I like my first 2 were pretty low key, and then by like the third one, me and my husband decided to hand spray the edges of some books, and I got new art. and then we like after that we did like two campaigns where we hand sprayed edges, so we were like spraying hundreds of books. And then we leveled up to where I could start working with an overseas printer who would do the edges for me, plus add foil, plus add like pattern end pages and stuff like that. So it was just like every single one built on top of the other, and they just got better and better each time.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm fascinated because I had a friend who kickstarted a short film. This is years ago now, like 2014 or 2015, and I remember when she did it, she said, "You can only ask your people once. Like you can only dip into the well once. But obviously, you've dipped into it 6 times, so you're doing something right." So what are your thoughts on that? Like going back to the same group and asking again and again?
I think that I think that how do I put this? I think you can ask people as long as you're offering something different every time. So like
Mhm.
the first time it like my first Kickstarter campaign, I was offering them just to get early access to a book. And they got the book and they could get like the existing paperbacks, so they could have gone to Amazon but signed. And then future iterations of it, people came back to get upgraded version of different books. So they weren't like they. It wasn't like I was asking them like, "Hey, can I borrow $5? Hey, can I borrow $5 again?" It was like I like here's a new product launch. It's like it's the same interior, but it's a completely different item that sits on your shelf. And I think that's what's different for like book side of Kickstarter is like there's a whole culture in bookish people of like the trophy shelf of like it's not only a book and it's something it's entertainment media, it's also something that is becomes a permanent visual part of your house that you look at all the time. So I think there's a different aspect to that. So when you offer something that looks elevated over what they might have already had, like if they had an ebook version from me originally, now
Mhm.
they're like, oh, now I have this like statement piece in my house that's just going to sit on my shelf and brings me joy repeatedly just looking at it instead of it just sitting in digital in the ether. Same with like if you saw like a short film, you're going to see it once or maybe a couple times, but you're not going to have it as a daily part of your life, if that makes sense.
No, that does, yeah. I mean, I guess you could have, like, a special edition DVD cover or something, but it's really not the same. I know what you mean, like a beautiful, special edition leather bound or whatever kinda thing
Yeah,
versus just, like, an ebook or something.
yeah, exactly. It's like it's and it's a different audience too. It's like the people that like ebooks only like ebooks. So it's like
Mhm.
I do see a decrease. Like I can see who backs for what and like who returns for what. And I've got a good core group of people that I've built up over time that they come back every time I have something new and they want the new thing. There's at least there's 6 people that they backed me from my first campaign to my most recent campaign, and they've been there every single time for me. And I've met some of them in person, and it's just like it's an incredible community building um,
That's awesome.
Kickstarter because it's like they're helping create something. They're helping bring something to life that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Mhm. So since you have run so many successful campaigns, what would you say are, like, the best practices for people who wanna start one?
I think the best thing to do is to make sure you lock in the graphics. I think that it's a very visual platform. So I think
Mhm.
that you want to make sure that you're working with like professionals as far as like graphic designers, artists, like the it you really need a visually stunning product because like the people that have like something really cool and unique but it like doesn't look like as aesthetic are going to have a harder time because it's like there's something about the way things look people just I think people value them more. And I think people also need, especially within the indie space, need to price themselves higher than they think they should because I see a lot of people like they try to like become comparable with like traditional publishing and they'll be like, well, traditional publishing charges $20 for this, and it's like traditional publishing is publishing 3,000 books at once, and they
Mhm.
can afford to like lose costs on that because they're printing it's not even 3,000, they're printing thousands and thousands of copies at once, and so they can afford to like lower the prices. We can't. We're a small business. So we have to like raise it up and people will pay it because it's a limited exclusive thing. That's the thing about Kickstarter. It's very much about what can you offer these people that is exclusive, is limited. It's the same kind of Comic-Con crowd who come for the exclusives. It's like that's what they're looking for. They're looking for something they can get nowhere else. they want
Mhm.
something special. Scarcity, I guess, is the best thing I can. The short of it is the scarcity.
Mhm. And speaking of which, it sounds like you're completely indie, right? You've never have you been hybrid or a trad pub or no interest in that?
Um, I've never like tried to go trad. I guess I'm sorta hybrid because I have worked with Podium. Wait, Podium. No, no, I've worked with Tantor for
Oh, okay.
audio. For
Oh, all right.
just three of my books, my co-written novels, were are with Tantor, and I also have three of my books are with an Italian publisher. I think it's Triskeli. Um, they did Italian translations of my Tales of Akatsuki. So those, so I'm kind of hybrid, but I don't really consider. I wouldn't consider myself hybrid unless I was with like an actual publisher that
Mhm.
published the book first. But I think by some people's definition that is hybrid. But my intention has always been to be indie, and I always plan to stay indie. I don't really have any aspirations to go trad, just because I like having more say over the final product, and I like having more say over like what I work on, and I don't want somebody's like bottom line to dictate what I do creatively, because ultimately trad's a big business and they are going to be looking at their bottom line, and I'm looking at my bottom line, and I keep doing this because it makes me happy, and I don't want to have to be like, oh, I lost access to this whole trilogy because the book one didn't sell how they wanted it to sell, so now I can never finish
Yeah.
that story. So
Yeah. That's cool. Very cool. And if people want to read your books or find you online, how can they do so?
So I'm everywhere. I'm on Instagram as Nicolette_Andrews. That's where I'm most active is Instagram. And then I also, you can find my books on my website. Everything's up there. It's nicoletteandrews.com. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, if you want to, the best thing to do is to support me directly and go to my website and buy from me directly. You can get ebooks and everything from my website.
Very cool. Thank you so much for being on the show, Nicolette. This has been amazing. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. It was so much fun.
Yeah, thanks for being here. This is really cool. If you want to know more about Nicolette's books, check the show notes. We'll put the links down there. Then follow us online at WG Therapy on X, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, whatever they're called. And go to writersgrouptherapy.com for all our episodes. We'll see you guys next time.